FM News Talk 97.1.
On-demand audio.
Our guest in the studio is Congressman Rodney Davis from the 13th District in Illinois. Congressman, how are you?
I'm doing great. I love your bumper music. It brings me back to the roller skating rink in the 1980s.
There you go. Thank you very much. I didn't roller skate a lot, but I loved that music, that's for sure. So I just saw AC/DC, in fact, a couple months ago here in St. Louis.
Is Brian Johnson still singing?
He had to quit. Right after that concert, he retired from live concerts. So I think I saw one of the last ones.
Wow, that would have been classic.
I know.
I've never seen him in person.
It was a good show. They put on a good show. But that's not what you're here to talk about. We're here to talk about
I'd rather.
What's going on in Washington.
I'd rather talk about AC/DC. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I just, I asked, I had Congresswoman Ann Wagner on yesterday. I asked her, the first thing I wanted to know was, what was your reaction last week when the House Democrats staged that sit-in, which just flew in the face of decorum in the U.S. House of Representatives?
I just kind of shook my head. I figured it was typical, and with today's political environment, I think that the media coverage they got is going to encourage them to do that more often. I would hope that they wouldn't, because in the aftermath, we've seen that they've used this for fundraising purposes. There were members of Congress on the Democrat side that sent out fundraising solicitations talking about sitting on the House floor, breaking the rules. How can we address the many problems that this country has, the $19 trillion debt, making sure that we actually reduce student loan debt for many families that are struggling to pay for higher education? How do we address those things when they want to just lay on the floor?
Well, I ran some sound from a story in San Francisco yesterday, and then I saw yesterday that John Lewis in his home state had done the same thing. These Democrats have gone back on break, and they've scheduled rallies for gun control to try to get their constituents all stirred up and blame the Republicans for doing nothing on this issue. For me, it's as simple as guaranteeing due process. I don't want a terrorist to have a gun. I know you don't want a terrorist to have a gun. I know that. But it's about common sense and making sure that you're protecting the rights of American citizens. You're not worried about protecting the rights of terrorists.
No, you're absolutely right. And my colleagues on the other side of the aisle and this administration never fail to push their own political agenda in the aftermath of a tragedy. The tragic shooting in Orlando was clearly, in his own words, related to radical Islamic terrorism. And my colleagues immediately go to the firearms side of the equation in this debate. Terrorists don't care whether or not they have a firearm owner's identification card. They really don't care whether or not they purchase their firearms legally or illegally. Any changes only affect those who are law-abiding citizens. Now, however, I know that Speaker Ryan just today told us we're going to run a couple of pieces of legislation next week that could positively affect the outcome in, stopping somebody who's mentally ill from causing a tragedy like Newtown or Aurora.
So that's something that when he says he's going to vote on gun legislation next week, along with that, or as part of that, would be something dealing with mental illness, which is something you've been working on, right?
Absolutely, it has. I've been a proud co-sponsor of a bill that was written in conjunction with the only clinical psychologist we have in Congress, Congressman Tim Murphy from Pennsylvania. Great guy, understands his issue well. What we're doing is actually making some common sense changes to the HIPAA laws to make sure that families and doctors can intervene with someone who's mentally ill before they get to stage 4, that crisis stage that we saw allegedly in the 2 shooters in those 2 incidents I mentioned before.
Right.
That's how we in Washington can try and help address these problems. But you can't legislate a solution to radical Islamic terror. You have to destroy them.
It's going to be tough as well, I think, depending on how it's worded, to legislate a solution to the mental health crisis as well, because you have to be sure that you're not putting everybody in one pot just because they've ever suffered from PTSD or depression and been on medication, that they're suddenly considered mentally ill and they can't ever buy a weapon.
Yeah, this bill doesn't address people buying weapons. This is a treatment issue. This is a treatment issue in a bill that will allow mental health professionals to actually treat those who are mentally ill before they get to a crisis stage, before they even think about creating the havoc that we saw 2 mentally ill individuals do in Aurora and Newtown.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. So this is a separate piece of legislation to whatever the gun bill would be.
Yeah, the gun
right?
bill would be to reiterate once again, which I already believe is law, that terrorists who are on the no-fly list and the terror watch list should not be able to purchase firearms.
And they're already flagged, as you mentioned, for what, 72 hours? Is that correct?
They are. And in the case of Omar Mateen, Mark, this was a clear failure in law enforcement. They had him on the terror watch list. They took him off the terror watch list. They interviewed him. And they have, whenever somebody like Omar Mateen, who is an American citizen, decides to purchase a gun while they're on that terror watch list, the FBI gets pinged. They have 72 hours to deny that purchase. They did not do that. So we're going to hopefully tighten that security up next week and see what that's going to lead to.
So yesterday I interviewed a guy named Philip Haney. Have you heard of him?
I have not.
So he is a former DHS whistleblower who claimed that while he worked for the Department of Homeland Security, he was impeded in his investigations largely by this administration, encouraging him to stop making connections between certain mosques and things like that. His basic allegation yesterday was that this administration, in its political correctness, has hampered our ability to stop these things before they happen, because for political correct reasons, they wanted you to not over-investigate somebody who is of the Islamic faith out of fear that you'd be accused of discrimination of some sort.
No, I fully believe that this administration cares more about political correctness than fighting radical Islamic terror.
So it'd be interesting to see if I think he testified before a Senate committee this week. So, I mean, he's got some interesting things to say. And the whole argument about the refusal to call it what it is has it dumbfounds me every day. Whenever I see the president speak about it, the fact that we won't call it what it is, how can you fight it if you don't call it what it is?
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, the president made a tremendous error when he called ISIS the JV team and let them march unimpeded across northern Iraq and then wreak havoc as a pseudo-nation state, which they've been operating as. And then we have to fight to regain that territory with our allies. Many tactical errors have led to so many innocent civilians dying, especially in Iraq and Syria.
Yeah. So let's move to a separate issue for a couple of minutes, because it's been an issue so far in this campaign that I've seen brought up more by Democrats, and that is wanting to give people free student aid or tuition to universities and that sort of thing. The student debt issue is real.
It is.
In most parts, if people have a $50,000 or $60,000 or $70,000 cloud hanging over their heads at 6 or 6.5% interest, paying it off is tough. You've introduced some legislation to try to help address that a little bit, right?
I have, and keep this in mind too. I'm the parent of a college student, and I see what many families are going through, and I get paid well because I'm a member of Congress. I couldn't imagine other families struggling to put multiple children into college and coming out without a lot of debt for those students. So my goal is, how do you then bring the workplace into helping students pay down debt? Because there are many recent grads that are not going to invest in their 401k. They're not going to actually take advantage of benefits that are offered by their companies they're working for because they want to pay down their student debt.
Right.
Sometimes it's going to take them decades to do it. I want to give businesses a chance to get a tax credit to pay $5,250 a year for new employees' student debt or an existing employee's student debt, and then also make sure that Uncle Sam doesn't go to that employee and tax him on that benefit.
Okay.
It's a win-win and has the potential to save billions for our country in defaults that are backed by you and all the U.S. taxpayers.
Right. So this would almost be an incentive for the company. Say, hey, come work for me. I'm gonna pay $5,200 towards your student debt.
Yeah, and if you've got $30,000 in student debt, you work at that company for 5+ years, your debt's gone. And it's paid for, and you're less apt to default, and it becomes part of that benefit package that will be part of your negotiation when you accept that job.
Congressman Rodney Davis, our guest. I've only got a couple minutes left. Let me move to Donald Trump for a minute. Do you endorse him? Have you endorsed him?
Oh, yeah, I said I'm going to support him. He's the presumptive Republican nominee, and I'm going to vote for our presumptive Republican nominee over the Democrats' presumptive nominee, Hillary Clinton. And I can't wait till the conventions are over. I'm going to the convention, too.
Oh, good.
Because I think then you'll start to see everybody continue to coalesce around our candidates.
Are you concerned at all that we haven't seen as much of that as I might have expected up to this point? I mean, I know Trump is controversial, but he's still going to be the standard bearer for the party here.
Well, he is. And I think in today's social media world, it's more publicized and it seems louder, but there's always been criticism. Remember back in 1980, Ronald Reagan had an independent Republican running against him. So this is not something new. It's just getting a lot of publicity, and it's hurting Republicans because Republicans are fighting Republicans about it.
Yeah, that's true. But you have to admit Trump's a candidate unlike any we've seen in my lifetime. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
He breaks the mold. I mean, he really just says what's on his mind.
Well, and you know what? I think the American people are ready for that.
And one last question, because I got about a minute left. His statement on trade. He's not conservative in any way, shape, or form when it comes to free trade. Are you concerned about that?
Yeah, I am, because I think we need global trade for many of the products that are manufactured in my district, like Caterpillar's mining trucks. We don't have the jobs in Decatur, Illinois, if we don't export that, because this administration says we can't use American coal. So we have to export coal mining trucks overseas to be able to have those jobs.
Yeah, all good issues. Congressman Rodney Davis, thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. We'll have you back anytime.
Looking forward to it, man.
All right. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.